Welcome to a short lesson on 3-act structure. Let's begin with an overview. As evidenced by its name, 3-act structure is composed of 3 acts. Act 1 is referred to as the exposition, or the setup. The purpose of Act 1 is to establish conflict. Act 2 is going to intensify that conflict. It's going to complicate your situation. Act 3 is going to resolve the conflict. You often see 3-act structure in a chart much like this one. Here you can see building from Act 1 to Act 2 up to Act 3 at the climax. We'll return to this chart at the end of the lesson. Let's begin with Act 1, the setup. Act 1 introduces your goal-oriented or your active protagonist, the central character of your story. Act 1 also explains the backstory and the current situation of your protagonist. Next, Act 1 finds the inciting incident, often referred to as the catalyst. This is the event that sets your plot in motion. It will also raise the central question: what does your main character, your protagonist, want? The purpose of Act 1 is to build to the first turning point. Let's see how this works in Aliens, the 1986 Ridley Scott film. At the start of Aliens, Ellen Ripley, our protagonist, has been in stasis in a shuttle for 57 years. She is rescued and debriefed by her previous employers at the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. They are skeptical of her claims that an alien creature killed her entire crew and forced her to destroy her ship, the Nostromo. Then we arrive at our inciting incident. The exomoon LV-426, where Ripley and the Nostromo initially encountered the alien, is now home to a terraforming colony. Contact is lost with the colony. This is our inciting incident as it sets the entire plot in motion. Ripley is asked to accompany the Marines to investigate the disturbance. If contact had never been lost with LV-426, the rest of the plot would not have happened. This brings us to our first turning point. This is the end of Act 1. Our protagonist is going to take decisive action that will clarify our central question, and it'll push the story into the next act, and usually into a new direction. In Aliens, Ripley, despite her fears, decides that she must accompany the Marines to LV-426, and she literally leaves Earth and goes back to outer space. This brings us to Act 2, referred to as the rising action. Act 2 is going to raise our dramatic stakes, flesh out the main characters, create a growing sense of urgency, and a steadily narrowing range of options. We see this in the rising action of Act 2 of Aliens. Aboard the spaceship USS Sulaco, Ripley is introduced to the Colonial Marines and the android Bishop, toward whom Ripley is initially hostile following her experience with the traitorous android Ash aboard the Nostromo in their previous film. A dropship delivers the expedition to the surface of LV-426, where they find the colony deserted. Inside, they find makeshift barricades, signs of a struggle, but no bodies, 2 live facehuggers in containment tanks, and a traumatized young girl nicknamed Newt, the sole survivor, who used the extensive ventilation system to evade the aliens. So here in Act 2, we've met the crew, then we've furthered the situation, and we've raised the stakes, which brings us to Act 2, the midpoint. We can think of this as a mid-act climax. This is once again going to change the direction of the story. It is also making our character's task more difficult, and this is often considered a no going back moment that prompts the second turning point at the end of Act 2. At the midpoint of Aliens, the Marines find the colonists cocooned, serving as incubators for the creature's offspring. The other aliens are roused and ambush the troops, killing half the crew. Ripley assumes command, taking control of the armored personnel character, and rams the nest to rescue the survivors. However, the dropship coming to rescue the rest of the survivors crashes into the station, and the remaining group are left stranded and must barricade themselves inside the colony command center. This leaves Ripley at her lowest point, furthest away from rescue. Ripley discovers that Burt sent the colonists here to LD-426 to investigate the spaceship and recover alien specimens for use as biological weapons. As a result, after Ripley and Newt fall asleep in the laboratory, they find that Burke has released facehuggers in order to impregnate her and Newt to smuggle alien embryos past Earth's quarantine, and to kill the rest of the Marines so no one can contradict his version of the events. This brings us to the second turning point. The second turning point is the end of Act 2. Our protagonist will face a crisis. The action will intensify, and this starts a ticking clock. Think of this as a deadline. It renders the final confrontation inevitable, and the second turning point often occurs in 2 to 3 dramatic beats, or plot points. So, in Aliens, the second turning point begins with beat 1. The aliens have invaded the command center and are quickly approaching the rest of the survivors. In beat 2, one of the aliens captures Newt. And lastly, beat 3. In beat 3, although Ripley and Bishop and Hicks have found safety, Ripley decides she must go back into the command center to rescue Newt. Here, again, we see the active protagonist making a decision and setting the course of the story in a new direction. This brings us to Act 3, the resolution. Act 3 begins with the climax. This is the ultimate confrontation, which will resolve the main conflicts or conflicts and answer the central question of the film. The climax is followed by the denouement, which is the falling action or the epilogue. This will leave all of our characters at a new equilibrium with all of our questions answered and every plot line wrapped up. In Aliens, we get an interesting situation because there are actually 2 climaxes. A false climax or climax 1, and then climax 2, which is actually the ultimate confrontation. So climax 1, or the false climax, Ripley saves Newt from the alien queen, destroys the queen's eggs, and escapes with Bishop, Hicks, and Newt on another dropship. However, the alien queen has stowed away outside on the ship, and we actually have a second climax, which is a battle between Ripley and the alien queen. Ripley is victorious, and that brings us to our resolution, the end of Act 3. Ripley and Newt are now safe and enter cryo sleep to go return back to Earth. The end. So again, here let's refer to our chart where we see the action continually intensifying, building up to our climax at the start of Act 3, followed by a